What's up, nerds? It's lunchtime. How y'all doing? It's 10:50 in the morning. This, the 6th day of November 2023. It is a bright, sunny, lovely morning. If you hear a weird noise in the background, that's construction and Steve the cat responding to the construction. There's some, there's always something going on, some pounding or whatever. Our good friend Eric Tentacle posted a video last night about how D&D is going soft and the Studio Ghibli-Inspired D&D. And he is responding in turns to this article that was posted in September about a new role-playing game coming out called Obojamba, Obojima, which is attempting to take the Studio Ghibli style of, comfy role-playing, Princess Mononoke, because, Princess Mononoke is so non-violent. Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, because, again, Nausicaa Valley of the Wind is so non-violent. Some of these people I don't think have actually watched Ghibli's movies or Miyazaki-san's movies, because they go, it's so, I watched Totoro and it's so cute and I want to play in a role-playing game world like Totoro. It's like, have you seen Nausicaa or Pokoroko or Princess Mononoke or even Spirited Away, which is scary? No. But okay, so they have this, and then they're like, I want it to be like Zelda, because Zelda's so non-violent and comfy. Have you played Zelda? Literally, the guy goes around murdering everything he sees, breaking into people's houses, and stealing their stuff, and vandalizing their stuff. There is nothing comfy, safe, or cute about Zelda. Now, so that's part of the problem. Now, these are the same people who last year said, how do we turn 5th edition to emulate Netrunner's Cyberpunk or Edgerunner's Cyberpunk from the Netflix coast, because the Edgerunner Cyberpunk TV show was on Netflix and everybody's like, oh, this is so fucking great. How can I take 5th edition and convert it to Cyberpunk? Now, the problem is with this article as well, and the problem is with the follow-ups to the article, is you didn't do your homework. You didn't spend the 5 extra seconds it would have taken. Now, in regards to last year and the Edge Runners and the whole, how do I convert 5e to Cyberpunk? That was because these people didn't take the 5 seconds to go, oh, wait, there already is a Cyberpunk tabletop role-playing game. In fact, there's several hundred. I don't need to convert 5th edition to Edge Runners. It already exists. Literally, Edge Runners is based upon a video game that's based upon a tabletop role-playing game by R. Tassolian that I helped work on called Cyberpunk 2020. So, no. It's the same thing. They're like, how can I take 5th edition and make it emulate Miyazaki, knowing full well that I have never watched a Miyazaki film? Otherwise, I wouldn't be trying to make this cute, harmless role-playing game, because there's nothing cute and harmless about Spirited Away, or pretty much any of his movies, with the exception of Totoro. And Totoro's pretty dark too when you realize what the main plot of Totoro is. It's like these kids are coping with the fact that their mom is dying in a hospital, and for some reason their dad has moved them as far as he can from their mom in the hospital, and the way they're coping is having adventures with Totoro. And what Totoro was trying to do is to get them to go deal with their mom. If you watch Totoro, there is nothing comfy about Ghibli's movies. So that's the first fault in this. The second fault in this argument is that you didn't take the 5 extra seconds to go, hey, I wonder if this genre already exists. No, you're like, how can I take 5th edition and turn it into Ghibli Zelda-inspired anime, instead of going, I wonder if this product already exists. And again, then that also goes with, D&D's and role-playing has this long history of violence, and it's never been safe. And for the very first time, I want to make a role-playing game that is comfy and safe, because it's never existed till now. And so what I want to do is I want to take 5th edition, a game that is designed not to do that, and break it down and grind it to try and fit a square peg in a round hole, to try and get it to do something that 5th edition is not designed to do. Okay, 5th edition is designed to emulate one very specific style of play. And I've said this 1,000 times before, as long as you let 5th edition be 5th edition, it's a fun game to play. It's not Dungeons & Dragons, but it's a fun system. I love 5e when you understand what 5e is. What 5e isn't is this. This is not what 5e is, okay? If I were to pick one game that totally did, this is what 5e is supposed to do, I'd either go Iron Kingdoms or Spelljammer. Spelljammer is what 5e is best at. Trying to make it anything other than Iron Kingdoms, Spelljammer, ridiculous Saturday morning cartoon fantasy doesn't work. Trying to make it comfy safe doesn't work. Trying to make 5e grim dark doesn't work. 5e only works as 5e. All right, it doesn't work anything else. The second fault with this was that your assumption that this genre never existed until now. Bunnies. Let me introduce you to a game called Bunnies and Burrows, a game that would perfectly fit into your definition of comfy, safe role-playing. Bunnies and Burrows was released in 1976. It was a game that centered on Intelligence Rabbit and introduced several innovations to role-playing game design, like players having non-humanoid roles and having skill-based instead of combat-based, and having situations that weren't resolved strictly by combat because it was trying to be Watership Down. It was trying to be that. Then there's games like Mouse Guard, Hero Kids, Golden Sky Stories, Tabula Fatama. There's at least 10 games I can think of without trying that do this. So instead of trying to make 5e into something you're not, you're trying to, why didn't you just bother to go look? And then this leads us to the whole argument about 5e being soft and it's not D&D anymore. And the OSR is angry at 5e because it's not D&D anymore. It's funny that all the people who are angry about 5e and claim that 5e is soft and it's not D&D anymore don't play 5e. And they just want anything related to 5e to die because they're still angry about January and they're angry that Wizards of the Coast ruined their Dungeons and Dragons, which they don't play. Now, yes, you are absolutely 100% right. 5th edition is not your Dungeons and Dragons. It is a completely different game for a completely different audience, which I am not a member of. But I enjoy the fuck out of playing and running 5e when I'm with a group who understands how it works. Now, I could go on to the whole thing about, well, we don't want any of the 5e retro clone things to bring, but I think that's a separate article as well. And that would be like my video about why 5e is 5e and why we want third-party 5e games to come out that do 5e better, because we want Wizards of the Coast to realize that what they're doing with 5e doesn't work, right? That's what we want, but no, that's a whole separate topic. So the topic of this is the softening of 5e versus the OSR versus comfy role-playing. And of course, the fact that until now, nobody was doing comfy role-playing. And here's a game that does it for the very first time, written by somebody who obviously has not done any research. Oh, this game's all safe and comfy, and it's about found families, and it's about inspiring Miyazaki Studio Ghibli-inspired stories. The very first picture I show is two people about to be eaten by a giant sandworm, because that's comfy and nonviolent. Oh, here's another guy getting eaten by a giant monster, and another one. Yeah, okay, so, but that's comfy and nonviolent. So Eric went on a thing about, you know, the softening of D&D versus the OSR, and that, you know, here are, if you want to play tabletop role-playing fantasy one specific way, there are games that exist that do that. If you want to find a game that emulates the 1980s, 1970s, 1990s style of D20 fantasy role-play, it's not 5e, and it's not games that are trying to make 5e other than things. 5e is not King Arthur. It's 5e. 5e is not Studio Ghibli. It's 5e. 5e is not dark, grim cyberpunk. It's 5e. Okay. 5e is its own beast. It's not Dungeons and Dragons. It can, of course, it can. Wizards, Hasbro can call whatever the fuck they want Dungeons and Dragons. They own that name. If they want to call a sandwich Dungeons and Dragons, they can. It doesn't mean it is Dungeons and Dragons. 5e is not Dungeons & Dragons. It's its own beast. And when you accept that it's its own beast is when 5e works. The problem with 5e is from day one till today, people keep trying to make it D&D, or people keep trying to make it anything other than it is. It only works as Spelljammer. It only works as a Saturday morning cartoon. All right? It's nothing else. So Eric's all about, and this, he's right. If you want to play that style of game, the OSR probably isn't for you. But if you want to play another type of game, well, here's all the types of games that are available to you through the indie movement, through the OSR movement, basically the games that aren't 5e. And, what he's trying to say here, what we're all trying to say here is, if you don't like 5e, let us show you other games. If you don't like this, the softening, the way Wizards of the Coast has taken 5e and what they've done with 5e, fine. Here's other games. Don't try and make it. And then, same thing with this. Instead of trying to make 5e into Studio Ghibli, let me show you the games that actually do Studio Ghibli style play, because they exist. And also, again, let me just close with saying, have you watched any Studio Ghibli films? Person who wrote this argument. Because if you had, your argument is invalid, because none of the things you claim you want to see in a game exist in a Studio Ghibli film, no matter how childlike and wonderful it is. Kiki's Delivery Service has got some dark undertones in it. My Neighbor Totoro has got some dark undertones in it. Spirited Away is scary as hell. Nausicaa Valley of the Wind is a post-apocalypse horror story. Princess Mononoke is about the industrialization of Japan and the nature fighting against it. And it's got people getting beheaded. There is nothing safe and comfy in the Studio Ghibli films. So do not use that as your example. Do not use Zelda as your example. Okay? Because there's nothing safe and comfy in Zelda. Link goes into strangers' houses, kills them, takes their stuff, and breaks their stuff. So your argument was flawed from the beginning. And yes, 5e is soft because it's not D&D. It is a completely separate game. If that's what you want to play, that's fine, because it's great if you understand what it is. When you try and make it something other than it is, that's when we get the problem. And that's what Wizards of the Coast doesn't understand. Wizards of the Coast doesn't even understand what 5e is. That's why we want these other companies like Tales of the Valiant to make better versions of 5e than Wizards of the Coast, because other companies like Cobalt understand what 5e is and what the audience for 5e is. Wizards doesn't even know who their audience is anymore. So that's why I'm always like, yes, let us support these alternate 5e takes, because we want 5e to exist for the people who want to play it, but we want it to be good, right? We want people to understand what 5e is, which I think is what Eric was getting to. If you want the dark, grim King Arthur, Conan the Barbarian, that's out there, and that's covered in the other titles, the indie titles, the OSR titles, the OGL titles, the 5,000 retro clones. That's out there. Don't blame 5e. Go do the 5 extra seconds of work. It took me 5 seconds to come up with a list of 10 games that do Ghibli-inspired role-playing that aren't 5e. And I will post that list down below. And that's about it for today, because I just feel like I'm just beating a dead horse. And once again, it's just another irrelevant, pointless controversy. And obviously the person who wrote the article didn't do any research, because if they did, they would have known these types of games exist and have existed since 1976. And they would have also actually watched a Ghibli movie or two and know what they were about. I'm the OGGM. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you even fucking care? I don't know. It's news. I'll talk to y'all later.